Well, it's July 4th. It's like 7:38. I've been doing the first works for the past couple hours. All right, I'm thinking about, you know, uh, I'm thinking about, when you go through your first works and you're, you know, in the process of writing your little book, the one that we're going to include in the Millennial Testament, the one that if you get far enough and it gets good enough, then God will show you his face as his stamp of approval. The process you go through from where you start until you see the face of God and even beyond will take you from where you're at in your mind and sort of where you've brought yourself or where you are now to heaven, a mental heaven. You're like, oh my gosh, like, wow, for me, I was like, cocaine snorting thief. Now I'm Mashiach, or Kalki, the 12th Imam, or, the lion. All three, because it's God's like perfect solution or whatever. Now, I never would have guessed this out of the gate, but through my journey, that's where I'm at now in my mind. Now, I'm not trying to convince you. It's just in my mind, that's where I am. Okay? And that is my heaven. It's a mansion in heaven. It's like a little nook that Jesus worked out. He's like, nah, he's here. Get him there. And then I'm thinking about my dad, who wrote a book. And, he was a geologist, geophysicist, oil guy with stuff to lose. And went through that process and wrote his version of his book. And God's like, or, the little mansion or whatever that Jesus created. It's like, nah, he's not the oil and gas guy. He uses geology to find and unearth the Ark of the Covenant, you see. And in his mind, that's his heaven. Regardless of what you, think, or I'm not trying to convince you of that. What I'm saying is, what I'm thinking about this morning is, Jesus created a little mansion, or a mansion, I don't know what size, but in heaven, where when your mind finds out what that is, you're like, oh, and that process, you'll see the face of God. But you've got to write it down or whatever. Not so much for people to read, just for you to have, but when he anoints you, you'll, how do I say this? You will, you'll know he's there. You'll know he's reading every thought you have. Like right now, any thought that I have, like the little part of my brain is like connected to God, because I know he's screening me, what's coming off of my lip, the air, like the breath from my lips, that sunlight, like everything's been, I don't know, planned or whatever. It's planned. I couldn't recreate that sunbeam coming through, the light beam. Anyway, here's my point. That, I'm thinking about, he has created a mansion for everyone. And it's about whether you want to find out what that is and put yourself, after all your first works, which is just you thinking about and thinking through, your life, your history, your surroundings, all of it, and keep moving forward, thinking about God. He's actually reading your mind. You don't know that yet for a fact. I mean, some of you may believe that, but you don't know it because you haven't seen his face. But when you see his face, you're like, oh my God, he was reading my mind the whole time. Yeah. And, as you go through it, when that happens, then you're on a different, you've resurrected yourself from the dead. You're no longer asleep. It's probably the best way to say it. And, or is a great way to say it. And that him showing you his face, that resurrects a prophet from the past. And we don't know who those prophets are. And you may say, well, like, whose prophet is better or worse? They all just went through the same journey that I went through, that my dad went through, that you can go through. And it's about, I mean, at the end of the day, it's you gathering information, doing your first works to convince yourself that God exists, and you're looking at the world and say, if anything peculiar happens, that's God, because he knows I'm actually on this journey. And as you keep moving forward, I do that like a horse, because really, you know, he's tracking the book of Revelation, because that's, you know, well, I explained that elsewhere, but the idea is we all become white horse riders. And that's the person who has some coincidence involving a white horse, whatever form that takes. For my dad, it was an electric charge, like a horse charges. For me, white horse meant cocaine, because I was more into sex, drugs, and rock and roll at the time. Still kind of am. You know, but that was my story, my heaven. It was like that gets him to see God's face. My dad's was geology and physics and math and science, gets him to see God's face, or will get him to see God's face. He hasn't seen it yet because he hasn't repented. It's an important part. You got to tell the truth on your journey, or else God won't show you his face. You got to own up to everything you've done. It's Judgment Day, guys. But if you admit everything you've done, you know, in faith that he sees that, which he does, he'll confirm it eventually once your story's good enough. But you got to kind of know, like, what am I trying to do? And the idea is you're trying to write a story. It's your book of the Millennial Testament. And on that journey, you do a lot of thinking. That's why my last name's Think. Denke in German, it's a think. And, you know, he'll monitor all that. And you'll get to your little, you'll get to your mansion, whatever that is. And it's not about, when you're there, you're going to have no care about, you know, as hard as it is for some of you to believe, you're not going to give a shit about a car or, you know, an actual mansion. None of that stuff matters, because you know you're being monitored. And you know that doesn't give a fuck about you having, you know, well, I don't want to speak on his behalf, but you know, the idea is you're going to lose everything and realize that the only thing important was you finding that mental heaven. And once you're there, your carbon footprint's a lot lower. It solves climate change and makes you happier than you've ever been, because you're resurrected from the dead. Your soul, your spirit, whatever, you will know, you will have seen God. You don't have to run around telling everyone, I saw God, blah, blah, blah. Just write, you know, you write your book and then you present it to me and I'll read it. And then if anyone is interested, I'm going to give it my stamp of approval and be like, yep, there, I can see all the events that led up to that person seeing the face of God. Then they recorded the seeing the face of God. Let's show it to the world. Just put it online. Join the club of people who, you know, wrote their own books for the Millennial Testament. Showing them get to their heaven, their mansion. So I'm thinking about these things.